Hello, I'm here with Lakeman for International Permaculture Day. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I'm told you do very interesting work, but I actually don't know about you, so it'd be really great if you could explain to us where you are, first of all. Where are you on the planet?
Well, I happen to be sitting in a place called the Planet Repair Institute.
Wow.
It's in Portland, Oregon. And this is the birthplace of a number of different initiatives that are all sort of self-sustaining. The most famous one is the City Repair Project, which began in Portland and has created something more than 300 projects across this city, and now has spread to something like three dozen other cities in North America. So, not including Mexico yet. And then Communitecture, which is a design collaborative of architecture activists, architecture and planning activists that are just very different. Our attitude is really to build community through everything that we do rather than building stuff. The biggest project, though, that we do in the City Repair Project that I should mention is the Village Building Convergence. That's coming up at the end of May and going into the beginning of June. And that's a 10-day placemaking festival that I'll say more about for sure. But that's a gigantic project that happens all across the city simultaneously for 10 days. And then the Planet Repair Institute, where I am now, is the location where many, many, many projects, including City Repair, began. So this is a place-based kind of assertion or insurrection, you might say, where we're kind of subverting all of our neighbors into the realm of urban permaculture by teaching permaculture design courses here, and then engaging our students with all of our neighbors to do design projects and implementations. So our neighbors become familiar with permaculture because the students bring it to them, and then the students implement things that then help the neighbors start to, undertake a process of transition.
It sounds like you're busy redesigning concepts. Like, I love your planning activists. I've never heard of planning activists before. Village Building Convergence. Wow. Placemaking and Planet Repair Institute. Sounds amazing. And how's it?
Let me say,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, how is it working? I mean, is it how successful is it? What do you think are the biggest achievements that you've, in terms of changing how people think about design and planning and living in the world?
Well, there's so many different ways to answer that question. You were just saying about how you were hearing about planning activism. Well, frankly, developers, bankers, politicians, and also architects and planners are in the business of creating unsustainable infrastructures. So they're obviously very important to subvert. And we don't just want to get them interested in permaculture, we actually want to transform their professional cultures as well. And I think why we're so successful is that, well, first of all, our historical framework is extremely broad and long. We're basically understanding that we live in colonial infrastructures, especially in the Western Hemisphere, pervasively. And in that context, empires historically are throwing these casting broad nets over the land with the intent to destroy indigenous cultures that are, by and large, more sustainable. And then the intent is to erase alternative patterns, which would all tend toward a more permacultural point of view in the world. Even if they're indigenous empires, they would tend to be more place-based. So we recognize that we're in that kind of thing, and at the same time, we also recognize that we ourselves come from villages at some point in our past. So we're basically holding up the notion of geomorphic settlements, where people are inherently observing and participating in place. And we see that those have been under attack by the patterns of empire, which are sort of aggressively overlaid through, the evidence, the geographic evidence, of course, of that being the grid, the military grid, that is so characteristic of where we are.
Yeah.
So we basically say, all right, we want to see geomorphic patterns, though, emerge from within the grid as an expression of local participation and democratic structures.
Wow.
So our most famous way to do this began in 1996 when a local neighborhood seized a street intersection and started to build interactive structures around the periphery, just as you would in like a German Platz or an Italian piazza. You would have all sorts of interactive edges.
Uh-huh.
So we did this illegally. We just basically said, oh my God, we live in a neighborhood zone. Our lives have been zoned. It's been sort of, through some legalistic structure that we've never participated in. We don't have the freedom, apparently, to create gathering places and robust local economies that, through which we would build, weave together our lives and have stronger, more robust relationships. So we just kind of decided to undertake that anyway, and we got in trouble. And the law was changed. The law was changed for the entire city within 2 months.
Wow.
So an unlimited number of streets.
Hang on, let me go back. What did you actually do? You had a party in the middle of the street, like the street parties that they had in London? What do they call them? Is that what you did? Or
yeah, except it's forever. It doesn't stop.
Okay. It wasn't just an action or repeated action. You actually redesigned on the spot.
We built structures that would be there forever.
Okay.
And we took the street intersection and we transformed the surface of it with this sort of giant, exuberant image. And then what we basically did was addressing all these goals. We addressed all these goals and objectives that exist for every neighborhood, including to slow traffic and raise livability sort of standards, to engage children, to build community gathering places. All these goals never being met, basically because people aren't doing what we did. So we basically said, all right, we need to transform this amorphous space in which we are supposedly powerless into a reflection of our own power to create together. And so, of course, we slowed traffic, and of course, all these people started to, make relationships with each other in the local community. But if you go there now, it's just about a half a block from me now, this first one. On one corner, there's a solar-powered self-service tea station. So you go up there. It's a beautiful thing. It looks like a little mushroom on the corner with a umbrella, and it's all made of natural and recycled materials. But it's maintained by the neighbors, so you can just come from anywhere in the world and have a cup of free tea. There's usually food there. And then next to it is this beautiful cob bench that is in the shape of a ancestor from this neighborhood, which is capped by this beautiful dome-like living roof. In another corner, there's a place for neighborhood history. That's all in the same corner.
Neighborhood history.
Yeah, storytelling. Got to make space for that. That's the street. On the other corner, there's a children's playhouse wrapped around a tree, and a memorial garden for a woman who died, and then a little art museum, little art and poetry museum.
Wow.
And then on another corner, there is a place for all kinds of information and trading. And all of this stuff is woven into gardens. And then on another corner, there's a small self-service library, and a stage, and another bench that's just, cob. There's cob on all the corners.
It sounds like poetry kind of crystallized or something. Like you really rethought a lot of concepts and you just put them in physical shape, no? So this was like Reclaim the Street. This was Reclaim the Neighborhood. Some action.
Yeah, but starting with a really important node, like in design schools, they teach you that urban design or planning is supposed to facilitate communication, not just facilitate the movement of goods and services. So in geomorphic villages that pre-exist the grid, the intersection is a place where people's lives come together. But in the American grid especially, it's just a traffic corridor. So what we basically say is, oh my God, we're still villagers. Take that node back and turn it into a place where people's lives are facilitated to connect. So it's questioning the pattern of colonialism, the most fundamental pattern of colonialism.
Wow, it's exciting.
Yeah, it's really lovely. It's definitely a tipping.
Because one of my passions is how we design with myths, because that's actually what's at the bottom of everything. That's what motivates us to design the physical things, and you're doing that together with the physical things. It's brilliant.
Let me tell you about a myth that we started here. Okay, so a lot of this, when it started, before the intersection, the first thing that we did, again, this was about understanding that we were in the colonial grid. We looked around and we realized, okay, there's no free meeting space in this neighborhood. It's all in a different zone, and you always have to pay money for a place to sit. There's no place for free association. So studying indigenous villages, we just said, okay, well, obviously we need a meeting house. We need a free meeting house where people can just go. So we built the most beautiful meeting house you could imagine that was based on it. It was basically a gigantic womb made of doors and windows that were all hung on posts, and all of them were on hinges, so the entire perimeter made of doors and windows could all open at once. And that was a very clever strategy that would come into play later. But we created a womb space. We invited all these neighbors to come. The idea was that we were basically testing this notion that everyone has a memory of having been in their mother. You see it in children when they put blankets over tables, put pillows and rugs, you know, the little things that they build and create. So we thought, probably that memory is still in everyone. And in this neighborhood, we might be able to accomplish hundreds or even thousands of years of recovery by creating a gigantic womb, bringing neighbors into it. They walk inside and suddenly they're able to feel safe, like they're at home again. And maybe they would make relationships more easily and quickly with other people. So this is what we did. And it had an incredible impact. The first week there were 25 people. Several weeks later there were more than 500, and people couldn't even get into the tea house anymore. So at that point we opened all the doors and windows so that everyone outside could feel connected to the people inside. Anyway, the whole idea of this was to just insert, you know, a spatial expression of an integrated environment, you know, ecologically, economically, you know, socially, and even mythologically. And what we were trying to do was invent a mythology that would be stronger than everything else around us. And I know we were dreaming big, but we thought, okay, we're going to build this tea house without permission and not get a permit. This will attract the city government to tell us we can't have it, that we've done something wrong. If we're lucky, by then we'll have hundreds and hundreds of neighbors already connected, and then all these people who don't think of themselves as activists will suddenly be ready to fight for something. That's exactly what happened. So we lured the city government in to say, no, you can't do that, you don't have the power, and then the neighborhood stood up and said, oh yeah?
Yes, we do.
It was just exactly like that. It was a big controversy. It was in all the media. So the city granted us a temporary permit. Meanwhile, then we seized the intersection, and then the city got mad at us about that. But then they legalized the intersection. Okay, so where this is going about mythology is that, meanwhile, while their attention was focused on the intersection, we started to build this peace machine inside of the womb space.
Wow.
Now,
what's a
you
peace
mentioned
machine?
mythology. I know this is a crazy thing. A peace machine is something that doesn't destroy, but that it brings people together.
Okay.
So we thought, okay, this tea house, we only need it for a little while, but what we're going to do is build this construction inside of it that will emerge like a butterfly out of a cocoon.
Oh.
And rather than having our tea house have to go away, what will happen is this thing will come out and it will unfold its wings like a gigantic butterfly. Literally, it was about a 14-meter wingspan of a gigantic butterfly, but it was a mobile tea house. So we took the kitchen of our tea house, we put it onto a truck, and we drove it around the city, creating gathering places all around the city, 27 times. And then we united all those places where there had been gathering into a huge circle of people holding hands all around the city. So we were saying, this is our city, we're going to take a stand, you know, claim our place, commit ourselves to this place, to Portland, and change this place. And there's all these other strategies involved as well, but we were activating the social culture. We were using permaculture principles upon ourselves, like, oh my God, we do belong on the earth. You know, we are part of the ecology. These principles will probably work on us as well. So,
wow.
That's what happened.
Amazing. Does Nori Huddle know about the butterfly? You know then.
Does who know?
Nori Huddle. She's one of the myth
I don't
makers
know.
that came out with this the butterfly myth about our era being like, you know, we're this caterpillar that's been eating everything up, and now we're going through this transformation. And she talked about the imaginal cells and how first they start attacking, they start getting attacked, like activists start getting attacked, but then they join together. When they start joining together, when these imaginal cells come together, they start creating the organs of the butterfly, which is nothing like the previous creature. So
My gosh.
you don't know about
You
that
should see
story?
what we've done.
It's a big story. It's like the story, of our era. Okay, I'll put you in touch with Nori. She'll love that. She's busy making butterflies all
Well,
over the place.
sure.
She's an eco-village builder in South America. Wow. How long ago was this? It sounds like you've been very busy.
Well, that was 1996, and
Okay.
it was a mobile tea house, and we called it the Tea Horse, and it ran around the city over and just endlessly until about 2008, and now we're rebuilding it again. It's about to reemerge, but first it was the Tea Horse, and we've built a number of tea stations, like the little umbrella thing I told you about in the corner. And then we've had the Tea Pony, which is another truck, the Tea Whale, and the Tea Pallet, and of course the Tea Rex had to happen. So many different kinds of gathering place.
So this sounds like Alexander 3.0 or something. Was he an influence? Like pattern language of
Perhaps.
cities and...
Perhaps. It's hard to say where all the influences have come from. It's such a group synergy, actually. People get excited about an idea and they just start to create together. Yeah.
But your background,
say.
I mean, were you always... did you come from architecture background? Were you always clear this is what you wanted to do, or what was your kind of transformation?
Both my parents are design
into a
activists.
planning activist.
Well,
New species.
Generally just design activism, really. Like my father was the founder of the Urban Design Bureau in the city of Portland back in the 60s when people started to realize that the city was going crazy and parts of it were dying, and they needed some visions about how to grow more. Actually, they didn't have the word sustainable, but that was the idea. So he was responsible for creating our first public square here in Portland and doing a lot of other sort of gigantic civic projects. So my bedtime stories were always about standing up to power to create commons for community.
Cool.
So I was pretty thoroughly indoctrinated, but my real influence was my mom, who is in Sardinia right now, researching these ancient village structures on that island.
Yeah.
Well,
she's also a planner or an architect? Wow.
Professor of design, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. And so you're working, but you mentioned you're out of Portland as well. You catalyzed other things. Or is it just Portland?
No, it's happening in many other cities.
So that you've got like a kind of network?
Actually, we are trying to decentralize it as much as possible, so nobody has to sort of have control over anybody else. Like our organization could provide some sort of nonprofit function for others, but we really just encourage people to get going and make it their own expression of place and culture. So they oftentimes call themselves City Repair as well, and then attach it like City Repair Los Angeles or Seattle or something. But I personally, I don't want us to have an administration that has to kind of look after everything.
Which, again, I was going to mention, this name is interesting because it kind of supposes that you can repair the city. And there are designers who are busy saying that the city in itself is a kind of error in terms of design because it inherently sucks in resources. But what do you think about that? Because you're busy repairing cities.
You just brought up... Okay. Well, I mean, I think that most of the theorists talking about sustainability and urban structures feel that cities, like some say, are our greatest hope. And I don't actually necessarily agree, but this is what they say, because people's carbon footprints are smaller, their ecological footprints are smaller, because they live in a more dense condition, things are more walkable, they don't have to traverse the landscape so far to go from living to working and stuff like that. But that's only part of the situation. I mean, the truth is, and we can see this in the Western Hemisphere especially, these are hierarchical infrastructures by design.
Right.
And they begin by being colonial infrastructures. Basically, I mean, I've written a paper called Precise History of the Military Grid City. And one of the things that we have to understand from the beginning of this kind of thing that we're in, whether it's a Spanish colonial settlement, in Central America or South America, or the American version or the Canadian version, more north, the Mexican version, they're all based on the same kind of formulation. In the Spanish case, it's the Law of the Indies. In the American case, it's the National Land Ordinance. In the Canadian version, it's the Dominion Land Survey. So in all cases, though, this infrastructure, it's not just about long, straight, flat lines and boring boxes. It's this mentality that begins by saying, all right, these indigenous patterns have to be erased, and these people have to be removed. Their sense of their holistic sense of ecology has to be eliminated, because now the world is going to be converted into a market commodity in which time, space, and life is all interchangeably saleable. So it begins as a conception of the world that is enforced through hostility and violence. And the whole notion is that the designers of the grid in every case are mostly interested in consolidating their own power and controlling the reality of everyone else. And I'm not. You don't even need to talk about. People have all these conspiracy theories about power being held by secret societies. You don't even need to talk about this stuff. No, just talk about history that's in the books. Like, these are infrastructures that are designed, like Portland, Oregon, where I am. This was conceived of as an administrative center that would house the working class, and we would cut down the forests around us and mine the landscape, and then basically send those materials to the East Coast, as we also built our infrastructure here, but essentially transfer the wealth, the profit, to people on the East Coast who had designed the.
Yeah.
So
that's why it's nice and it's clear when you have a designer mind. A system is designed to do what it does. The purpose of a system is what it does.
For those of us who are constantly feeling like the world needs to change, we feel like the world sucks and there must be something wrong with humanity in general. But actually what we're in is it's actually a very well-designed infrastructure that's doing what it was designed to do very well. And our misery and the destruction of our world is simply what empires do through this kind of design practice. So when we're talking about design activism or planning activism, what we're largely meaning is that we address that stuff from within and redesign it in a way that helps people. Because if you just reject it, you just say, "Oh, I'm an anarchist. This all sucks. Everyone else must change." You're not going to get anywhere.
Because there is a romantic idea about cities. I mean, it's great that you say you see it like this, because there is a kind of implied function of cities that is to bring people together to do wonderful culture or something romantic like this, and it's like, depends.
Well, okay. So speaking of that, like at the same time as these are infrastructures that are designed the way they are. We are human beings, and our nature as villagers actually happens to rock. So we will do amazing things. We will try to make culture out of it. Like we will say, "Oh, I love you. Why don't we have children?" And then the village will start to emerge everywhere around us, which will kind of blur the fact that we're in this unjust, inherently, self-destructive infrastructure. Because we'll just and as we see in Portland, the villagers have now taken over. The political infrastructure is now us, and there's no wall between community and the city hall, really. I mean, It's not perfect. There's a lot of political sort of games going on still, but things have changed enormously, and that's because I think we've woken up to the fact that you really can't divorce commerce and community and be sustainable. Everybody's into being healthy here, and we really want to be a part of a greater whole. You can just see it in the way that people are choosing to change. Leopards are definitely changing their spots all over the place around here, I'd say.
And it sounds like they're really wild colors. Okay, this is incredibly inspiring. Tell me what you're most excited about and that you see in terms of developments coming up, and what you find most hopeful.
Well, actually, I have to say on a personal level, after having been involved in a lot of things, I think it's a really good sign that nobody's mad at me right now. And that's, you're asking me a question that has to do with really big scales, and I can give you that answer. But boy, right now, the fact that everybody it seems to be getting along in the activist cultures around me, with a few personality issues that are just normal, but and then I'm getting to be really effective and appreciated like there seems to be this sort of healthy context, and I get to really contribute without having to deal with a lot of drama. That seems to me to be a really good sign.
So you had a lot of the other stuff in the past?
Oh yeah,
Yeah?
yeah,
A lot?
yeah, yeah. Sure. Well, I mean, how many people understand going into this that even as they're trying to change the world, they're going to bring all these unhealthy and unsustainable patterns of behavior with them into it? You know, like we've had the silliest fights over whether or not we are a culture of friends trying to change the world, or whether we're a nonprofit who has to sort of behave all legalistically. Like, what a silly argument. Um, so we've had those sorts of polarizations over and over again, where we kind of forget why we even got started. Yeah, or silly things like conflict always comes as a surprise to people, and it's like, wait a second, we've been here before. Can't we just have a party about this? It's like we know that we're misunderstandings every time. Why can't we just sort of celebrate that before they happen, so that they don't come as a surprise? So it's taken a lot of growing. This year, our big theme for our hugest project, the Village Building Convergence, is urban succession.
Wow.
So we're kind of recognizing, hey, wait a second, it actually takes a while to get where we're going. Like it takes cycles of growth and change. And in this case, we can be intentional about it. But yeah, I think really, I mean, we're called to align ourselves with succession in permaculture anyway.
Yeah.
So we're really focusing on it very intentionally. Like, wow, there are people who are just getting started, and they have this big picture of where they want to go, but they keep wanting to be where they want to go right now, instead of realizing that they kind of have to get started first.
Yeah.
So get started. And then there's these other communities we're working with that are a few cycles ahead, and their social cultures exhibit the fact that they've been working together for a while. And then there's others that are way farther ahead, and they've got a lot more done. So we're just really trying to help people understand that transition is a process of succession, and you just have to kind of work with what you have and who shows up, and really excited about what you get done.
That's what's great about having a designer kind of framework. And that's what I find exciting. I mean, so over and over in these conversations, just today with International Permaculture Day, the people who are clearer about how change happens are engineers, designers, poets. There's this kind of mindset that's already in pattern mode. And natural succession is a fantastic pattern that permaculture has made very real, very tangible. And when you start applying it to other things that aren't landscapes, you get all sorts of amazing pictures coming up. But that's what's one of my questions. Is like, the vision now look at even ethical development thinkers, is that cities are just going to grow and grow and grow into even bigger monsters. And the population is going to keep growing, and they're going to keep concentrating more in cities. And there's architects, which I know personally, who call themselves sustainability people, who are designing for this. They're designing for densification and calling it sustainable. It's like, what? Yeah. So you were saying that succession, in a way, goes against the vision, having a very firm vision, in a sense. But what is your vision? I mean, what is this village succession? What you see cities doing in the future?
Yeah. Thanks for continuing to want to go deeper on this question, because it's just vitally important. Well, most architects and planners are still thinking at a component scale, and even though they're thinking systemically, they're just thinking of physical infrastructures. Then at some point they might think about funding structures and political structures, but they don't fundamentally question the most important aspect of what's driving all this dynamism and the densification itself, which of course is population growth. There's this mantra, and I don't know if I think it's handled very differently in a European context than it is in the Western Hemisphere. But here we still have the echoes, the emanations of westward expansion and manifest destiny here, where it's like, drive to go west, go west, go west. Grow, expand. Like, there's all this empty room and there's all this open land. Let's get out there and mine that and develop it into something, because it's not developed yet. And But there's this driving mania that's embedded in our political philosophy and our the very economic structures all around us that we're so deeply invested in, that we must continue to grow. And that growth impulse, let's just be frank about it. Let's put all the cards on the table. This is about the expansion of empire. You know, if you even try to have this conversation, unfortunately, everyone is so underdeveloped in this conversation. They'll say, oh no, but people will have sex, they will have children, everyone wants a higher quality of
And
life.
it's bigger than that. That's why I got mad at people changing the third ethic. You know, limit population and consumption became sharing, fair shares, you know. It's like, no, I'm sorry, it's not the same concept at all. You know, you can be a colonialist mentality sharing, but you cannot limit population consumption and be a colonial mentality, you know. But yeah, it's there, even in the Greens, and it is the same pattern, and it just takes on a different form, right? But it's there underneath everything.
Yeah. Well, from an ecological perspective, you can't keep doing that. You can't keep trying to create. You can't end up creating more and more stress on a system, trying to add more and more to a certain physical limitation, a set of physical limitations, without creating collapse. So, I mean, we know this historically of our own behavior. So it's not like it's a new conversation. It's really ancient stuff. Yeah, we also can't go around destroying other people's realities, because, of course, then they'll be mad at us. So there's just no way that this works out. But people are afraid to even have the conversation. And architects, I mean, there is, even in the Living Building Challenge here in the U.S., where people are trying to make buildings that create more energy than they consume, all of their equations begin after everything arrives at the site, pretty much. Like, you know, they don't really think holistically about the overall impact that they're having.
With the implication that we need more buildings.
Yeah.
Don't even go there with an architect.
Well, of course, part of why that architect is thinking that way is they're worried about feeding their family and paying their rent. But then again, they have to think holistically. I mean, unfortunately, all of this leads to some sort of revolution that could be quite tense and violent, because, I mean, as we're doing the work that we're doing to try to feed our families, we have to be conscious of the fact that we're working harder than we need to, in order simply to create surplus that ends up largely going to people who just simply need more. There's this sort of aspect of this feedback loop, which is absolutely absurd, that the whole of the society is basically working to create excess for people who already have more than their share. And that has to be questioned. And if architects are just sort of saying, well, you know, if anybody, not just architects, but if anybody is sitting there thinking that, no, we must grow, we must work our lives, you know, work ourselves to death and separate ourselves from our children every day in order to just keep feeding this system, which is, you know, there's many conversations that everybody knows need to be had.
Okay, so the village succession, what does it look like? I mean, how do you envisage this succession to what, villages? Like...
Yeah. Okay, so our best idea is that, you know, here we are in this infrastructure, we wake up within it, and rather than trying to build a whole new construction elsewhere, which has tended to happen over...
Another kind of colonialism.
Let's reject this thing and go out into the countryside and start an eco-village. I mean, I love eco-villages and everything, but I think our only hope at this point, thinking about the overall impact on the planet, is to literally transition where we already are. So, you know, this block where I am right now is a perfect example of our idea. We're doing something called block repair. And in city repair or planet repair, we just kind of address the scale that we're at, and we tend to label it a repair project. So block repair starts off by saying, all right, well, here we are in this arbitrarily configured square, in which some developer laid out all these houses individually just as products. There are no pathways that connect us, and there's no commons that was made at the center. There was no intent for us to be a community, just a house. In this neighborhood in particular, historically, we were supposed to be housed so that we could cut forests down.
Right.
So what we're doing in this repair project is, I mean, among so many things, like tearing up lawns and putting in gardens, of course, tearing out fences and putting in, you know, sort of common spaces that connect. or putting in pathways that traverse the block diagonally. But what we're basically saying is, okay, on a sort of a power level, we understand that our lives are such that we've been zoned to have to go elsewhere to consume culture rather than generate it. Through zoning laws, we have to go to like a commercial area of the city to have an experience of culture as opposed to having one here. So what we've said on this block is, all right, well, we will have our own creative spaces. We'll have our own multi-use, like the one that I'm in here is kind of a creative art studio.
Wow.
It's also an office, but this is a repurposed garage where we've made it into a kind of a shared community space for people to be able to co-create, to present, to have musical performances, and dancing and yoga and stuff. So this whole program of new spaces on the block includes, of course, tool sheds that are shared, multi-use meeting spaces, office space for people to be able to use, shared alternative transportation, bike corrals, all those sorts of things, but also to just kind of question the whole notion that we can't generate our economic basis right here. So instead we're doing that. Also it says, you can't generate your own kind of agricultural basis where you live, and so instead that's what we're doing. So
Right.
the idea is like, if we're finding that we live in a block, we're only supposed to be housed, then instead we transform it into a village that has all of the dimensions of culture being generated right here that then we can enjoy as we our relationships to be more strong. So it's not like, instead of going away to do the eco-village outside of the city, the eco-village just emerges from us because we are the eco-village. That's the idea.
You already have all the people and all the structures. Just okay. I get it.
Yeah, and not just one block, but all the blocks and all the intersections.
Which is the structure before. I mean, I'm busy building an eco-village, but in a place where there are already buildings. It was a village before. It was a little village, and it was an eco-village. And we have so many of these structures that are lying empty, and Spain is famous for them. And we just need to repopulate them. They're there. We don't have to build one single thing, Put anything else underneath, no more square feet of earth under cement. It's not necessary. There's plenty there to recolonize in another way.
So you need different strategies then. That's cool.
And that's what I love about this conversation. We need to think in a different way. When and people say this as a platitude a lot of times. Like I think Einstein was famous for saying, "You can't solve the problem from within the same form of thinking that produced it." And that's why we need poets and myth writers and architects who, activists. Activists that break memes. That redesign memes, ways of thinking. And I'm very, very excited at having met another one.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. And please, can we have some pictures? Because it was so delicious when you were describing all these things with their fantastic names. I'd like to put it together in your presentation so that people can also link to things quickly from having listened to your talk. Okay?
Sure. You want me to send you some images, some stills that you can use?
Yes. That would be great. Here in Skype is fantastic. So thank you ever so much for your time. We really appreciate it that you've given us this really exciting urban vision of growing village cities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much for your time.
Look forward to meeting you over there sometime.
Anytime you like, come and see our village.
Okay, I will.
Take care.
All right. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, Mark. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.